Okay, let's unpack this. Step into the digital world for a moment with us. Scroll through your feed. What do you see?
Hmm.
Increasingly, well, it's less about polished selfies and more about these highly curated aesthetics, right?
Hmm.
Stunning visuals, maybe AI generated, or content where you just don't see a face.
Exactly. We're talking about, digital entities, faceless influencers, AI models, whatever term you prefer,
Yeah.
accounts where the visual perfection can be honestly breathtaking.
It really can. The technical skill, the artistry, it's phenomenal sometimes.
Absolutely. You find these like impossible architectural spaces that look totally real, or fashion models who are purely AI, or stories told just through graphics and text, visually,
Yep.
often flawless.
Right. And you'd think, okay, perfect visuals, that's the key,
Mhm.
right? Especially in such a visual space. But here's the puzzle, and it's really the core problem we're diving into today.
Yeah.
Why do some of these absolutely stunning, visually perfect accounts just explode? They build huge, engaged followings, real connections, while others, just as beautiful, seem to, I don't know,
Well,
vanish.
they just fizzle out.
Yeah, they're forgettable. They don't stick.
It's a thing we see everywhere online. You can have two accounts, same aesthetic, maybe both using AI, right?
Hmm.
One becomes this cultural thing with a super loyal audience.
Huh.
The other one, it's struggling just to get likes. And our sources for this deep dive, they really zero in on this. They argue pretty strongly that the visual perfection, while yeah, it gets eyeballs initially.
Gives the scroll stop.
Exactly. But it's not the engine for long-term engagement. It's not what builds loyalty.
No, what is? That's the mission today. We've pulled together a stack of stuff articles on faceless marketing, research on AI branding, notes on digital personality.
Oh, a whole pile.
A whole pile, yeah. And we're going to try and distill what makes a digital entity, one without a face, actually connect with people, like on a human level.
We'll be looking at why personality isn't just, a nice to have. It's pretty much essential.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get practical. We'll give you a sort of step-by-step blueprint based on these sources for how you actually build that personality.
Okay.
We'll look at the different shapes it can take, the real impact it has, engagement, trust, even, making money, and super important, how you measure if it's actually working.
And listen, even if you're not thinking, right, I'm launching my AI avatar tomorrow, these ideas are still super relevant.
Oh, absolutely.
This whole deep dive, it's really about understanding what drives connection online now. Whether you're making a character, building any kind of brand, or honestly just trying to make your own profile stand out.
In that crowded feed.
Exactly. These principles apply. It's about cutting through all that visual noise and tapping into something deeper that resonates.
It's learning how to be felt, not just seen. A great way to put it.
Okay, so let's jump right into that first piece.
Yeah.
The problem with just being, well, just visually perfect in this ridiculously saturated landscape.
Yeah, the digital world right now, it's just swimming in visual competence. Like across the board, especially in niches using AI or anonymous aesthetics, you just encounter this overwhelming level of polish. The sources talk about scrolling through feeds that are just endless streams of flawless looks. Hyperreal rendering, cinematic lighting, environments so detailed.
It feels like the baseline for just good-looking content has just gone through the roof.
Totally. Everyone, or at least a lot of creators, have access to tools that can make stunning, technically perfect visuals.
Yeah, the barrier to entry is lower.
Way lower. But that accessibility, it leads to the saturation point. And the consequence, which comes up again and again in the sources, is that even with all this visual perfection, a huge number of these accounts just fail. They don't capture attention long-term, don't get meaningful interaction. They are, put bluntly, forgettable.
They might stop your scroll for half a second because, okay, that looks cool, but there's no reason to pause or engage or come back for more.
Exactly. One source had this really vivid phrase calling them accounts with no flavor, no soul, no story. Yeah. They take up visual space, but they don't take up mental space or emotional space for the audience. They're missing that distinctive thing that makes you remember them or feel something.
And that's something, according to the sources, that's the crucial missing link. What people actually engage with, what makes them, like comment thoughtfully, share it, actively look for the next post.
It isn't just the beauty, not the flawless visuals alone.
Yeah.
There has to be something more driving that.
Right.
It really boils down to identity, tone, vibe. It's that sense that there's a consistent, recognizable presence behind the pixels.
So the visuals attract.
But the unique character is what holds the attention, keeps them there.
Okay, so the main argument here from the sources is without deliberately building a unique tone and character. These AI models, these faceless accounts, they're just way less likely to build that loyal
Well,
audience.
less likely, yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to the ones that somehow manage to create this presence, this distinct personality that makes them pop out from all the visual noise.
The visual is the invitation.
But the personality is why people decide to stay for the party. Without that anchor of character, the audience just drifts onto the next perfect image.
Okay, so if visual perfection isn't the be-all and end-all, and personality is the anchor,
Yeah.
let's talk about how that personality shows up, especially when you don't have a face to rely on. The sources talk a lot about emotional resonance.
Emotional resonance. Yeah, this is where things get deeper than just aesthetics. It's about the ability of a brand or a digital entity in this case to actually evoke strong, authentic emotional responses. It's about forging a real personal connection that goes beyond just looking at something or reading some info.
There's this great analogy in the sources comparing it to a tuning fork and a piano.
Yes, exactly. Imagine striking a tuning fork. It vibrates,
Right.
right, at a very specific frequency.
Okay.
Now, if you hold that vibrating fork near a grand piano, the strings inside the piano that are tuned to that exact same frequency will start vibrating too, in sympathy.
They resonate.
They resonate, they amplify the sound, create harmony.
So the idea is, when a digital entity or its content strikes that right emotional chord in someone,
Tapping into their feelings, their values, maybe their experiences.
it makes something inside the audience vibrate in harmony too.
Yeah.
They resonate with it. It amplifies the connection, creates
Yeah.
this feeling of like a relationship.
Exactly. It's not just about the content itself. It's about how it makes the audience feel and how it connects with something that's already inside them.
That's powerful.
And what's really interesting here, especially with AI and digital stuff, is how technology can actually help build this connection. Not create it from scratch, but help.
How so? Like AI can feel emotion.
No, not feel it, but tools like sentiment analysis, natural language processing, they're incredibly good at understanding the audience's existing emotional landscape.
So AI helps you read the emotional room, basically.
Precisely. These tools can sift through huge amounts of data comments, feedback, how people talk about certain topics online to spot the main emotions, the sentiment trends, the specific language people use when they're expressing feelings about your niche or content.
Okay.
And that real-time insight, it's invaluable for figuring out what kind of message, what kind of story is actually landing emotionally, and why.
So it gives you data to shape your emotional strategy.
Yes. But one source really stressed this. AI can give you the data, maybe even help generate text or visuals, but the human touch is still crucial for infusing genuine emotion, for crafting narratives that feel authentic.
Right. It's not just automated feeling.
No, it's that mixed data-driven insight plus human creativity. That's what unlocks real emotional resonance.
Okay, but how does this work for a faceless entity? If there's no human face showing emotion, how do you evoke those strong feelings?
Well, this is where being faceless can actually be a strength, according to the sources. Emotional resonance doesn't need a physical presence. The connection isn't built on recognizing a face or reading body language. It's built on how the content makes you feel consistently over time.
So the focus shifts completely.
Yeah,
From the visual source to the emotional impact.
exactly. Trust and authenticity for a faceless entity. They're built through reliability, through the consistency of the emotional experience it provides. If your faceless account consistently puts out content that makes people feel inspired or understood or nostalgic or just entertained, they start to trust that source of the feeling.
So understanding those underlying human emotional triggers,
Yeah.
Universal desires, fears, hopes, shared needs, that becomes absolutely critical when you don't have a face to rely on for recognition.
Super critical. You have to ask, what is your audience looking for emotionally? Is it escape, knowledge, community, self-improvement, adventure?
Right.
If your audience craves adventure, for instance, your faceless entity can tell stories that evoke that exact feeling using visuals, using narrative, that capture the thrill of exploration, even if the entity itself isn't, a person hiking a mountain.
The connection is with the feeling.
The feeling of adventure, yeah.
Yeah.
Amplified by the content.
And what's the payoff? What does mastering this emotional connection actually deliver for the entity?
Oh, the sources are really clear on this. Entities that manage to evoke genuine emotional responses. They stand out dramatically.
How so?
In that feed full of just, well, pretty pictures, they're the ones that grab attention and actually keep it.
They cut through the noise.
Precisely. And that deeper emotional connection, it directly builds loyalty and trust. When the audience feels genuinely understood or valued or moved by the content,
Yeah.
they develop a real bond with the entity. They stop being just passive viewers. They become dedicated followers who trust the source of those good feelings. And that builds lasting relationships, which is way more valuable than just getting fleeting views.
Sound like the bedrock of a real community, not just an audience list.
Absolutely. And when people feel that connected, they're way more likely to engage actively.
Okay, so we've really established why personality and emotional resonance are so critical, especially without a face. Now, let's get practical. The sources offer a kind of blueprint for how to actually do this, how to infuse that personality.
Right. Moving from the theory to the practice, how do you take something that looks great but might feel, well, empty, and make it connect?
The sources break it down into a few key steps.
Okay, step 1. Define the core energy or vibe.
This is ground zero, absolutely the starting point. Before you create a single post, you need to decide, what does this entity feel like? What's its dominant tone? What kind of character archetype does it fit?
But like was. Mysterious.
Or minimalist.
Or friendly.
Exactly. Think broad categories. Is it the mysterious observer, the luxury princess, the quirky best friend, the wise mentor, the confident expert? The sources even suggest using established brand archetypes like the innocent, the sage, the explorer, the rebel, the lover, you know those.
Yeah, like picking a role for your digital character to play. That's a great way to think about it. And picking this consistent energy, this archetype, it gives you a creative compass. The sources really emphasize this. Once you nail down this core vibe, everything else gets easier.
How so?
It dictates your content themes, the style of your visuals, the specific words and tone you use in captions, and crucially, how you interact, how you reply to comments, DMs, everything.
So if you decide you're the mysterious observer, your content is going to look and sound totally different than if you're the quirky friend.
Totally different. Mysterious, maybe dark visuals, cryptic captions, sparse but intriguing interactions, quirky friend.
Great.
Vibrant visuals, chatty, informal captions, frequent, funny interactions.
Consistency is key.
Paramount. Consistency in that chosen energy is what lets the audience recognize and actually bond with the personality.
Okay, step 2. Craft a compelling brand story.
Right. When there's no face, the story, the narrative around the entity or the brand it represents becomes incredibly important.
Yeah.
The sources keep coming back to this. Stories are just fundamentally how humans connect, how we make sense of things. People don't just connect with a face. They connect with values, with purpose, with a journey.
It's the why behind the perfect picture.
Exactly. This story needs to articulate clearly what the digital entity stands for. What's its mission, its purpose for existing? What impact does it want to have? And crucially, how does its existence align with the audience's own values, their own aspirations?
This is where you inject the human side, even if it's not actually human.
That's it. The story can focus on how the entity's message or its content empowers the audience, maybe simplifies their lives or elevates their experiences in some way. It's less about a fictional biography, maybe, and more about the narrative woven around its impact.
And it has to feel authentic.
Absolutely. It needs to reflect genuine value, subtly integrated into the narrative.
Did the sources give examples of this?
Yeah, they did. They mentioned brands like Tom's Shoes, you know, the one for one thing. That mission is the brand story.
Fair.
It takes center stage over any individual face. Banksy is another great example. The art itself, the statements it makes, the story in each piece, that's what builds the connection and authenticity with a massive global audience, even though nobody knows who he is.
Total anonymity, but huge connection.
Exactly. And one source mentioned a brand called EcoThreads. They connect not just by selling sustainable clothes, but through telling stories about their environmental impact, the ethical journey of their materials. That resonates directly with their customers' values. The story provides that emotional anchor when the face isn't there.
Okay, but that raises a big question. How do you make something that's basically code and pixels feel?
Yeah.
Well, relatable, humanish. That's to step 3, right? Developing specific identifiable traits.
Yes. This is the practical blueprint the sources offer to give the entity dimension, to make it more than just its look. It's about building these little character markers the audience can grab onto.
By giving it a backstory,
Yeah.
some lore,
Absolutely. Give it a narrative background, even a simple one. Is it a digital explorer documenting forgotten virtual places? An AI artist creating impossible sculptures? A data archivist sharing hidden patterns it finds? This lore gives context, a sense of history, or purpose.
And habits, like digital daily routines.
Exactly. Show, or at least hint at, consistent, relatable habits. This could be visual, like a recurring digital coffee cup appearing in different scenes,
Okay.
or hinted at in captions, like just crunching some data before the digital sunrise, or maybe using story formats to show a little sequence of its day. These small, consistent actions make it feel like it exists in time, has a rhythm.
Signature phrases must be huge for recognition, too.
Oh, critically important. Give the entity its own unique way of speaking. Specific words, catchphrases, maybe even certain emojis it uses all the time in captions, comments, replies.
Hmm.
That distinct voice immediately signals who's talking and reinforces the personality every single time it communicates. Think about characters with catchphrases you instantly recognize.
Right. And imperfections. That sounds wrong for a perfect digital creation.
It does sound counterintuitive, yeah. But the source's stress, it's vital for making it relatable. Authenticity isn't about being perfect, it's about feeling real.
Okay.
So giving the entity minor, carefully chosen flaws or quirks makes it more approachable. We're not talking technical glitches here.
Right, not bugs.
No, personality traits. Maybe it's not great at remembering digital dates. Or its visuals sometimes hint at a sort of curated digital messiness.
Huh.
Maybe a narrative quirk where it sometimes overshares a little carefully chosen info. Or makes relatable mistakes within its digital world.
Interesting.
That little touch of vulnerability, even if it's simulated, builds trust because it moves away from that intimidating, unattainable perfection.
So it's not a bug, it's a feature, a personality feature.
Exactly. It's a deliberate narrative choice or a visual choice to
Mhm.
make it feel less like a cold machine and more like a character with some depth. And underpinning all of this is tone matching. Just relentlessly commenting, captioning, interacting in character. If your entity is the confident expert, replies are authoritative, helpful. If it's the quirky friend, replies are playful, informal. That consistency across every single touch point is absolutely crucial for cementing the personality you've defined.
So, quick recap.
Yeah.
Backstory lore, habits, signature phrases, those curated imperfections, and consistent tone. That's the toolkit for building a relatable digital character.
Pretty much, yeah. And when people feel that connection through these traits and this consistent personality, the sources show it really does boost engagement, encourages support like tipping or buying stuff, and builds that stickiness we talked about.
Okay, step 4 then, leverages all this through specific storytelling tactics.
Right. Storytelling comes up again as just pivotal for creating that deep emotional connection, especially when you're faceless. It's how you breathe life into that character blueprint and make the emotional resonance actually happen again and again.
Using universal themes seems key here.
Fundamentally, stories that tap into those core human experiences. You know, the search for belonging, overcoming challenges, the joy of discovery, nostalgia, chasing freedom. These themes resonate deeply no matter who or what is telling the story.
The lack of a face doesn't weaken those core narratives.
Not at all. And emphasizing shared values through these stories, absolutely essential. The narratives you weave through visuals, text, maybe interactive stuff, they should reflect the values, the hopes, the challenges of your target audience.
So they see themselves in it.
Exactly. When they see their own ideals or struggles reflected, even abstractly, it strengthens that emotional bond, that sense of shared purpose.
What makes a powerful story in this digital, often visual-first world? What are the key elements?
Well, the sources point to familiar story building blocks just adapted for the medium. Things like relatable characters, even if they're abstract, maybe representing the audience's journey or personifying a concept. An engaging plot needs a beginning, middle, end, even if it unfolds across multiple posts or stories. And the deliberate use of emotional triggers within the narrative. Moments designed to spark joy, empathy, curiosity, hope, maybe anticipation.
Can you give us some concrete examples from the sources? How are digital entities actually using storytelling?
Sure. One mentioned was Mindful Co., an AI companion app. The storytelling wasn't about the app's features list.
Right.
It was about the narrative of Seren, the AI companion itself, and its journey of learning to understand the user's emotional patterns, providing personalized, empathetic support. The story focuses on the experience of connection, the feeling of being understood that the AI enables.
Okay, that's clever.
Another was Soundscapes, an audio tech brand. They use storytelling about how their AI curates music to match your emotional state, adds ambient sounds. The narrative centers on enhancing the listener's emotional experience through sound, making the brand synonymous with accessing certain feelings or moods.
So the story can be about the interaction, the experience the entity provides, not just its own backstory.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. It's dynamic storytelling, often with the user implicitly as the protagonist and the entity as the guide or enabler in their story.
That makes sense. Okay, the final step in this blueprint, fostering community engagement.
Yeah, and this is another area where being faceless can actually be a strength, paradoxically. By deliberately building a community around the entity or around the values it represents,
Mhm.
you create this powerful sense of belonging and shared purpose among the audience. The sources argue this can often create deeper, more resilient bonds than just following a single person's persona.
Why does focusing on the group work so well here?
Because the audience isn't just following one individual, they're joining a tribe, united by shared interests, shared values, or the unique vibe and mission of this entity. The loyalty shifts partly to the community itself, to the shared experience, which can be incredibly strong.
So how do you actively build that community?
By consistently highlighting those shared values, the mission, the vision, the ethics of the entity that you know resonate with your audience. By creating shared experiences. Things like interactive content polls, Q&As answered in character, challenges related to the entity's theme, maybe user-generated content campaigns where the audience participates, even virtual events.
Getting people involved.
Exactly. And by actively facilitating conversations among community members, not just between the entity and individuals, using social media discussions, maybe forums, dedicated Discord servers, whatever fits.
Like gaming communities, right, where the bond is really with the game world and the other players.
Precisely. Blizzard Entertainment is a classic example. They cultivate these massive, passionate communities around their game worlds. Players feel deeply connected to each other and that shared universe, often more than to any specific developer.
Yeah.
Nike plus Run Club does it too, creating that sense of community, shared goals among runners. Glossier, the beauty brand, built a lot of its early buzz by fostering this strong community-first brand voice, making customers feel like part of an ongoing conversation.
So the power of the collective bond when a single face isn't the main draw.
Exactly. It shows it works.
Okay, let's just quickly recap that blueprint. Define the core energy vibe, maybe use archetypes. Craft a compelling story around values and impact the why. Develop specific, relatable traits, backstory, habits, phrases, even curated imperfections. Leverage storytelling with universal themes and emotional triggers. And actively build community around shared values and experiences.
And woven through absolutely every step, consistency. Consistency, consistency, consistency. That's what makes the personality believable and the connection reliable.
All right, we've got the why and the how. Now, what does all this effort, building personality, fostering emotional resonance, what does it actually do?
Yeah.
What's the real tangible impact for a faceless entity or brand?
The sources point to several pretty significant outcomes. First and foremost, a dramatic increase in engagement and also content recall.
So more likes, shares, comments.
Yes, but more than that, higher quality interaction. Content that's infused with emotional language, with relatable narratives, it just naturally encourages more meaningful interaction.
Like longer comments.
Longer comments, yeah. Shares where people add their own reaction, explaining why it resonated with them. Higher view completion rates on videos. People aren't just mindlessly double tapping, they're reacting, they're sharing, because the content made them feel something.
And that feeling makes it stick in their minds,
Yeah.
makes it memorable.
Absolutely. Emotionally resonant content stays with people way longer than just purely aesthetic stuff. It's the content they remember later, maybe seek out again, and are much more likely to share. And that's powerful organic growth right there.
Okay, what about loyalty and trust? Does it really build that?
Oh yeah, that's a direct and profound impact according to the sources. Consistent emotional connection fosters really deep-rooted loyalty.
How so?
When an audience feels consistently understood or entertained or inspired by the entity's content and interactions, they develop this strong sense of trust. They feel seen, they feel valued, not just as eyeballs, but as individuals whose emotional needs are kind of being met by this interaction.
So the trust isn't in a person's face. It's in the reliable source of that feeling.
Exactly. They trust the feeling and the message. And audiences that trust you become loyal advocates. They'll defend the entity, they'll recommend it, they'll stick with it, even when algorithms change or platforms shift.
And does all this fuzzy feeling stuff actually translate into, you know, money, greater monetization potential.
Absolutely. The sources are very clear on this link.
Mhm.
Emotional, connected, loyal followers are significantly more likely to support the entity financially.
Oh,
Whether that's through direct tipping, like on Twitch or Patreon, or buying products if it's a brand, or clicking affiliate links because they genuinely trust the recommendation, or even supporting crowdfunding campaigns.
so it moves people from just passive watching to active support.
Precisely.
Mm.
And beyond direct support, having a distinct, well-loved personality just opens up more doors. Opportunities for collaborations with other creators or brands, getting reposted or featured organically by bigger accounts, being included in promotional roundups. As one source put it, when your entity feels like a character people connect with, instead of just, digital furniture, it actually has real value in the digital economy.
So the soft work of building personality leads to hard, tangible financial results.
It really does, and we should also touch on authenticity and vulnerability in this context.
Authenticity without a face still feels like a bit of a paradox to me.
It does seem that way at first, yeah.
Yeah.
But authenticity here, it's not about revealing a physical person. It's about being real to the defined character, being transparent where it makes sense for the narrative, and consistently upholding the values and personality you've established.
So acting in line with its own defined self.
Exactly. An authentic, faceless entity is true to its own story and mission.
And vulnerability. How can a digital thing be vulnerable?
This is where the anonymity can actually be an advantage. The entity can share narratives about struggles or lessons learned, setbacks, moments of uncertainty, but it does it through its story or its content.
Ah, okay.
The creator behind it doesn't have to feel personally exposed.
Like sharing the entity's journey, including the bumps in the road.
Exactly. Sharing the challenges of its mission, maybe the difficulty in achieving a goal from its lore, or even just expressing a sort of curated confusion or exploration within its narrative. This narrative vulnerability lets the audience empathize, connect on a deeper level.
Because it's not perfect.
Right. It fosters trust because it moves away from that image of flawless, unrelatable perfection. It adds a layer of that human-ish complexity we talked about.
And finally, there's that whole element of mystery.
Yeah, by definition, not showing a face creates curiosity. Who is this? Or what is this? What's the real story here? That natural intrigue prompts the audience to engage more deeply sometimes.
How so?
They might look for clues, try to piece together the personality, really try to understand the entity.
It turns engagement into a bit of detective work.
Kind of, yeah. And that mystery can also create a sense of exclusivity. The audience feels like they're part of something special, maybe even in the know about this unique entity. Supreme, the streetwear brand, is often mentioned here, cultivating mystery and scarcity to build desirability and a cult following without relying on one public face.
Right. Okay, so the impact is broad.
Yeah.
More engagement,
Yeah.
deeper loyalty and trust, better monetization potential, authenticity through consistency, relatability through managed vulnerability, and that inherent intrigue from the mystery. That's a really strong case for prioritizing personality.
It really shows that focusing on these seemingly intangible qualities yields very tangible, measurable results online.
Which brings us perfectly to the final question. How do you actually know if any of this is working? How do you measure something as abstract sounding as emotional impact or personality resonance, especially for something faceless or AI-driven?
Yeah, it's true. You got to look beyond just follower count or basic likes. Measuring emotional impact, according to the sources, needs a kind of layered approach, using different methods and tools together.
Okay, what are the key ways they recommend tracking this?
Well, a basic one is still engagement analytics, but you look at it differently, more nuance.
How so?
Sure, raw likes and shares matter, but pay really close attention to the depth and quality of comments. Are people leaving thoughtful responses that connect to the story or the vibe?
Yeah.
Are shares coming with personal notes like, this really resonated with me because
Uh-huh.
high interaction is good, but the nature of that interaction tells you much more about the emotional connection.
So it's not just volume, it's the type of engagement. Got it.
Exactly. Then there's a more direct approach, sentiment analysis. Using tools that analyze the text in comments, messages, mentions to figure out the underlying tone.
Positive, negative, neutral.
Right. Is it mostly positive? Are specific emotional keywords popping up frequently, like inspired, relatable, comforting, hilarious? This gives you as a sort of emotional temperature check of your audience's responses.
And expanding that outwards with social listening.
Yeah, social listening tracks conversations about your entity or brand that are happening outside your own channels. What are people saying on Reddit, on forums, in private groups, maybe on other platforms? How is your entity being talked about in the wild?
Crucial for getting the real picture.
Totally. It helps gauge the broader emotional perception, understand how that personality you're building is actually being received and interpreted out there. You need to know what people say when you're not in the room, so to speak.
Makes sense. What about asking them directly?
That's customer feedback surveys, highlighted as a powerful direct tool. You can design surveys to specifically ask about emotional response.
Like what?
Like, how did our last story series make you feel? Or what 3 words would you use to describe this entity's personality? Did interacting with us change your mood? Did the feeling evoked by our content influence your decision to engage further or maybe purchase something? These direct questions give you invaluable qualitative data, and sometimes quantitative too, on that emotional impact.
And the last one was behavioral analytics software. Sounds techy.
It goes a bit deeper than just surface engagement, yeah. Behavioral analytics tracks how users interact with your content and profile on a more detailed level.
What kind of things?
Metrics like how long they spend watching a specific video or reading a long caption,
Hmm.
the path they take through your profile. Do they click on sections you've labeled our story or values? How do they engage with interactive elements you've designed to build connection?
Oh, okay.
If people are spending significant time on content that develops the entity's backstory or explains its values, that signals a deeper level of engagement. It's driven by interest in the personality and narrative, not just casual scrolling.
So you're looking for behaviors that show genuine interest in the who or what and the why, not just what it looks like.
Exactly. It's a multi-pronged approach. And the sources really emphasize this measurement thing. It's not a one-and-done check. It has to be continuous.
Ongoing monitoring.
Constantly monitoring these different metrics. And crucially, A/B testing different approaches. See what resonates most powerfully. Test content that leans into vulnerability versus content that emphasizes confidence. Test different story arcs, different emotional triggers.
So you refine the personality and the storytelling based on actual audience feedback and data.
Precisely. Using these insights lets you fine-tune that blueprint, optimize your content strategy, and make sure your messaging is consistently hitting the mark, resonating deeply with your audience's emotional landscape. The goal is always to deepen that loyalty and drive the actions you want by effectively connecting through personality and emotion.
It makes perfect sense. Building a personality isn't static, it's an ongoing process. And the data from these measurement techniques is the feedback loop you need to steer it effectively.
It's how you stay tuned to your audience's emotional frequency, keep that resonance strong.
Okay, wow, we've really covered a lot of ground here, a proper deep dive. We started by seeing how visual perfection just isn't enough anymore.
Right, in that crowded digital space.
And that personality, emotional resonance, that's the real differentiator. We walk through that practical blueprint for how to actually build it. Defining the vibe, crafting the story, developing relatable traits, using storytelling effectively, building community.
Step by step.
Yeah. Then we looked at the tangible impacts. Better engagement, deeper loyalty and trust, real monetization potential, even using the facelessness for authenticity and mystery.
All those benefits.
And we wrapped up by exploring how you actually measure this seemingly fuzzy emotional impact, using a smart mix of analytics, listening, direct feedback, and behavioral data.
And the big takeaway, the thread running through all these sources, is pretty undeniable. Giving your faceless influencer, your AI entity, whatever digital presence you have that doesn't rely on a human face, giving it a distinct, resonant personality. It's not just like a creative flourish.
No.
It's a core strategic imperative. It's how you cut through the noise, build real trust, cultivate that deep loyalty, and ultimately find meaningful success online.
And that blueprint gives you the roadmap. Treat it like a brand or a character. Be intentional about its energy and voice. Give it those relatable, humanish quirks and habits. Tell compelling stories that tap into universal feelings and shared values, and actively nurture that community around it.
And always be consistent. Consistency is the glue. It makes the personality believable, makes the connection reliable for your audience.
Because when you do all that consistently, you're creating something way more powerful than just pretty pictures.
Yeah.
You build a character people actually connect with, a content engine that resonates, an entity people care about, trust, and want to support.
You move beyond just being seen to being truly felt.
Which is the whole point of connection, right?
Exactly.
So, as you listening reflect on this, maybe think about how these ideas apply to you. Here's a final thought to chew on, something provocative maybe. Based on everything we discussed about universal themes and emotional triggers,
Mm-hmm.
what single core universal emotion or shared human experience does your faceless entity or the brand or project it represents have the most authentic and powerful potential to really tap into and amplify for your specific audience?
Yeah. What specific feeling do you want to leave people with? Long after they've scrolled past the image, what's the emotional echo?
Something to think about. This has been a really fascinating deep dive into I guess, the soul of the digital.
It really has a complex challenge, but with some surprisingly clear, actionable pathways forward.
Absolutely great discussion.